So let me start this video by blatantly telling you that you are being sold a bunch of lies and misrepresentations. Intentionally so. The media we consume are so desperate for our collective attention, they outright lie or hide the truth to get it from you. They use anger, jealousy and our values against us, all to get us to participate. The truth is, the media doesn't care and has no interest in offering any solutions or common ground. You may believe this to only be mainstream media. Sadly, alternative media and other content is just as bad, if not worse. Since a lot of the rules mainstream media has to follow, alternative media are free from. Woke is the new tribalism in today's society. While it's a moral and political ideology first, it bleeds into all aspects of our culture. Wokeism, if that's what we're going to call it, has many facets. While it's an ideology with many contradictions, it comes with rejection from the anti-woke mob that produce the same, if not more, contradictions just to oppose the other side. I put forward that wokeism tends to create the hatred it proposes to eradicate, while at the same time its naysayers also tend to validate woke anger. It's an insidious feedback loop, where the answer is often somewhere in the middle of both opposing sides. The common ground solution is shouted down by both tribes. For this video, we'll hone in on one aspect of it, wokeism in Hollywood. So wokeism in Hollywood, to be clear, was the idea as I understood it, that more of an effort was needed to be made to diversify, both in front and behind the camera, with Hollywood elitism requiring to be brought down a notch or two. We've all seen the award shows bestowing themselves trophies for just how great they are. It's hubris at its highest level. Movie stars also tend to live in a two-tier system, one rule for us and another for them. This needed to be corrected, and the exploited nature of the industry that most people didn't get to see was now being exposed. Most people understood it was a long overdue bill that was due. This on its face would have been somewhat good. More variety was needed in the casting of lead roles, and Hollywood was stagnating for years. So new people with new ideas was clearly needed to help to reinvigorate the industry. In this context, we can see why many people bought into it. Except, as we all know, this wasn't the case. That effort part was turned into force, and while I think most reasonable people could agree a few diversity hires here and there would be a decent alteration, for a change in perspective at the very least, instead the industry was packed full with people who had a much more radicalized version of woke, where they think the average young person is an activist, and that nearly all pre-established structures need to be torn down and rebuilt. I want to be clear, this is woke these days, so it's hard to say whether woke was always this radical and they enticed people with a soft sell first, like with communism before World War II, or just became more radical over time. Either way, it's not important for this video. In this context, we all know what woke is now. That's what matters. Hollywood, obviously being money driven, for various reasons jumped on this idea. The swapping around of personnel made it seem like they were clearing the swamp, so to speak. And if you were to listen to someone from Hollywood's PR, they're now more in touch with their audience or whatever nonsense they come out with. But I'd argue the main reason Hollywood latched onto this idea was because by using woke ideology and slapping that onto the storytelling formula, Hollywood believed it could revive that overused formula and it could keep selling you tickets to the same movies over and over again as long as it had some woke elements in it. Basically, an easy fix for easy money. And as we can see at the moment with Hollywood's fight with the actors and the writers over the use of AI, there is no bar that is too low as long as it can make easy money. But to come back to adding woke elements into your scripts is actually not a bad idea. People, for some reason, are more than happy to see the same stuff remixed over and over. Remakes and sequels are popular for a reason. Take the success of Disney's live action remakes as a recent example. Rightfully so, a pushback was generated that called out this woke ideology and pandering. Star Wars The Last Jedi was the straw that broke the camel's back for a lot of passionate fans. An entire side of YouTube has been created off the back of this film and beyond. For simplicity's sake, let's just call them anti-woke YouTube. Here's a few generalizations about them. The channels call out whenever something uses the woke ideology, and then they taunt, go woke, go broke. And it works like a villain of the week, where channels all hop on the same relevant subject matter. Honestly, they offer very little as creators or critics, often reading articles verbatim and with commentary added that basically says that's woke or bad or some variation of the two. While I can excuse the laziness and the lack of creativity, this is modern YouTube after all, it's the acting self-righteous as they do, getting pleasure in watching someone or some show or movie get destroyed because it's not how they wanted it. Their self-importance is that blinding, they can't see they're using all the woke tactics. Repeat the same chant endlessly and demonize and cancel your opposition. Then gloat to your audience, rinse and repeat. Now let me be clear, I'm not saying there isn't some justification for this, but two wrongs don't make a right. While we could look at many examples, and believe me there's no shortage of them, let's look at the most prominent one, and someone who I do think has a lot to offer. The critical drinker. First off, I'm not picking on the drinker, he is the one I've personally watched the most, and it only goes to show that he's making enticing videos. Just in case you don't know who he is, I'll just give a little bit of context and be as brief as possible. The Critical Drinker is a big YouTuber. His content revolves around calling out woke media, mostly Hollywood, usually criticising them for focusing on woke messaging and not on making good movies. That's really about it, and I would go as far as to say the majority of what he says I would agree with. But for years now he's been throwing his weight around with no pushback. In the same way I expect this video to be heavily disliked and have a pile of hateful comments on it. This lack of pushback would be fine if I thought he was playing fairly, except for the most part he isn't, using one-sided messaging and states everything as the definitive version on the matter. By refining his content to his audience, giving them exactly what they want to hear, he's become a gaslighter extraordinaire and has no self-reflection on his blatant contradictions as a YouTuber. Let me explain. I'll summarise and coalesce some of the drinker's main arguments, and this is useful as his videos highlight what the majority of people in the space say, and now see if you can spot the problem. So I'll begin. Hollywood are lazy, churning out and repeating the same tired old formula over and over again. They're basically a record on repeat. The films are low effort, more focused on the woke messaging rather than what the actual movie is about. They have a tendency to bring back old franchises in order to milk them for all they're worth, in order to use that pre-established audience for money. Now obviously there's a lot more to it than that, but that's the brief overview of it. Now these channels, case in point Critical Drinker, are the exact things they claim to hate. They pump out the same lazy content over and over again with the same message on repeat, just remixed in some way. They bring up old tired franchises for attention, all to promote their message that woke is bad and anti-woke stuff is good, with his video message being more important than the movie or show he's talking about. The irony is, nearly every argument he makes, when reflected on himself, only produces contradictions. If you're still struggling to understand what I mean, just replace the subject matter of nearly any of his videos with the word critical drinker and see for yourself. Listen to his content for long enough, it's clear he wants a certain standard. But then funnily, at every opportunity, he himself fails to live up to it. Now let me be fair, the Critical Drinker is not like these other channels. He's a great communicator. He says and puts arguments together in a concise and entertaining manner. It takes him 5 minutes to say what it would take someone else 20. Probably because he's been doing it for so long and has refined his arguments to a knife's edge. His drinker gimmick is brilliant, as he's able to be funny, critical and flippant all at the same time, and his attitude, video length, and the fact that he's always talking about a relevant subject matter mean he's got a universal appeal. And I'm seeing him heap praise on something he really likes, and once in a while he'll make a video on one major problem bringing modern movies down and offers a solution. And that already puts him miles above, as I can't say that for most channels in this space. Most of these piggyback channels string their audience along and absolutely have no intention of wanting to solve the problem, only wanting to complain about it into their echo chamber. Drinker at the very least can produce videos that analyse the problems and offers a reasonable solution. Now his solutions are something I take pause with because he often looks to the past, when I think more of an effort should be made to encouraging something completely new and original. Despite the effort I've made to make the drinker's side more appealing, I still believe both tribes are untrustworthy. Both listen to the loudest voices of their respective audiences. Hollywood are making the choices that they do because people on Twitter are in now direct contact with their creators and are more than willing to scream any sort of ism to get what they want out of modern movies. While on the other hand, the critical drinker, I've yet to see have a controversial opinion that doesn't agree with his fanbase. How is that not possible that he hasn't said something that his anti-woke fanbase didn't like, considering all the years he's been on YouTube and all the movies he's reviewed? Not at least one movie or show at this point? Very questionable. Either he's self-censoring himself to not go against his audience, which would be a giant ironic contradiction, as that's what Hollywood does, or his opinion is based on what the majority take is on the film, in which he offers very little as a reviewer than just a mouthpiece for their opinion. Take this with a bit of tongue in cheek, but if Hollywood is trying to keep the woke Twitter people happy, then these YouTubers are trying to keep the loud anti-woke Redditors happy. To put forward a simple question, what are these anti-woke channels without woke Hollywood? Ironically, the whole identity is based on anti-woke content, ideologically driven to have their view be the only one that matters. They're both coming from the same poisoned well, singing from the same hymn sheet, both trashing the other to bolster their own side. Right or wrong has long been forgotten about, and the tension that comes from hatred is the only commodity that matters. Where's the self-reflection, the ability to say I got it wrong, or even say the other side has a point there? Where's the nuanced view where you give at least some credit? You know, the true criticism where you don't hot to grab clicks, but you say it to legitimately help? But that would mean you truly care what you're talking about. But the fact is, these fan bases don't care whether you're truthful or genuine. They just want to be told what they want to hear. So there can't be a synthesis. There can't be a compromise, because then both would cancel each other out and cease to exist. And it's not entirely these YouTubers' fault. Audiences are the problem, fueled by loathing for the other side, a never-ending game of cat and mouse. There's a saying you shouldn't disrespect your fanbase. However, the respective audiences from both camps are out of control these days, and these YouTubers bear some of the blame for their one-sided approach to criticism and outright stirring hatred. But the tribalism has almost become a sickness, where you might agree with one or two things from one side, even though you're on the other side of the aisle. Too bad, because you're either with us all the way or against us. Because none of these YouTubers practice nuance, this is seen as acceptable behaviour, to spur on spiteful and despicable language on what is essentially a bit of fluff entertainment, nothing more or less. Anyone who thinks they can get rid of hatred with more hatred might be the greatest crook of them all. So what's the solution? Well, really it's a simple one. We have to bring nuance and appreciate movies for taking risks, trying new things, and understanding new ideas can fail but could work in the right context. There's an adage I'm fond of. You've probably heard some variation of it. It goes like this: in order to be great, you have to do things that decent, average, or even something that's good wouldn't do. I utterly believe this to be true, because in order to be special, you have to take risks. Now, formulas work for a reason, due to refinement of ideas that worked and in no way should be lampooned. However, formulas stagnate over time, and what was once a good idea eventually becomes average. It's the law of diminishing returns. The superhero genre in Hollywood at the moment being the clearest example. The novelty has clearly worn off, and now they feel mostly like a copy and paste job. Formulas are so powerful because following the template is a surefire way to have at least moderate success, except they're boring. So what we get is a novelty put in to gloss over the rehash, and if it was being entirely truthful, some actually do work, while some don't. Hollywood for a while has been using so-called woke changes in hope of revitalising the formula, and truth be told it hasn't worked. The formula now is on life support. While a lot of these YouTubers want Hollywood to go back to the old bag of tricks, and while I think that would lead to some moderate success at least in the beginning, the end point would be the same, since all you're doing is just rehashing old ideas, but because they haven't been used in so long, they seem a bit fresh. So back to the solution: do something different, dare to be great, zig when you should zag, essentially take risks. Otherwise, what's the point of doing another sequel, and another sequel, and another remake, and another remake? Many fan bases say after the fact they should leave beloved franchises well enough alone. And while I can agree with that to a certain extent, not moments before that, they're clamouring for another sequel. Your mind would be melted. Do you want something new, or do you want a rehash? Do you want us to bring back old characters, or leave them alone? No, fanbases will say, we want new characters, but we want them to be like the old ones, maybe have a different name or something. It's maddening. So you just want a rehash then? Okay then, something new, they'll say. Well, new comes with taking chances, and that comes with huge danger. With hundreds of millions on the line, it can fail, and it can fail supremely. Now that's okay as long as we balance it with a nuanced view. This may have been bad or weak, but you should watch it because there's some good ideas, and give credit where it's due. Not that this sucks and it ruined my childhood. If a movie could actually ruin your childhood, you obviously haven't entered adulthood. Now this is going to get me a lot of hate, but Star Wars The Last Jedi and The Last of Us Part 2 are good examples of new concepts brought to a pre-established property, and both are ridiculed for their new ideas and the risks they took in both retrospective storylines. Now both plots contain woke ideas, and I think that's the weakest part of both. So I'm not saying there isn't truth to it. However, these fan bases hold these properties to a standard that even the greatest movies of all time would struggle to clear. For example, I've seen almost a frame by frame criticism of the new Star Wars films. Look, on a side note, I appreciate the hustle, and the creator's passion could not be called into question. And if I was being honest, I'm not even the biggest fan of Star Wars, and I really don't like the new films. But the idea that those original films could be put under the same scrutiny and they would survive, given how funky those first 3 films are, that were clearly making up things as they go along, suddenly they're now the gold standard? It's arrogance in its purest form. Both sides are kinda laughable because both preach a watered down version of equality and merit, with YouTubers often pointing out how Hollywood, in order to make women look good, just shame men. Yet both tear down each other to make themselves look better, and no compromise is ever made. I know someone watching this will come to the opinion that I want people to give praise to bad movies and criticise good movies, and I'm not saying that at all. All I'm asking for is a more balanced approach, and there's a very good reason why. Because people who are so quick to criticise artistic endeavours, most of them haven't the faintest idea of what it takes to be original. And that's easy to see coming from YouTube and social media, where copy and paste is seen as the quickest way to success, with AI only going to make that matter worse. With no appreciation or earnestness at the value of trying to be original and all the hardship that entails, you come to the conclusion that new and different are bad, while at the same time putting forward that the same idea repeated for the millionth time should be repeated again. Your lowbrow criticism doesn't evolve art, it stagnates it. Just to wrap up, I totally understand that people are the embodiment of a walking contradiction. I too realise that I do not live up to my own standard I've set for here, nor do I expect either side to be perfect, but a realisation and acknowledgement of such a thing is sorely needed in this YouTube community. Otherwise all we are echo chambers and nothing gets resolved. The sad fact is, maybe that's what both sides want. This has been Jamie on Woke and Anti-Woke YouTube, and if you've made it this far into the video, I want to thank you for watching.